I never expected to end up in the hospital from sushi. Or maybe it was witchcraft. Either way, when I collapsed with a mysterious stomach infection, I thought for sure my daughter Candace would come running. After all, I paid for her wedding, bailaid her out of that pyramid scheme mess, and once faked a sprained ankle so she wouldn't get kicked off. So you think you can tap? But Candace never showed up. Not even a text. Instead, it was Trisha, my son's tattooed motorcycle mechanic wife, who stayed all night holding my hair back while I vomited. The same Trisha I once told Roger was beneath our social circle. The same woman I'd snubbed at family gatherings for years. When discharge day came, I had an epiphany that hit me harder than food poisoning. My own flesh and blood ghosted me when I needed her most. Meanwhile, the woman I'd judged was whispering, "You're too spicy to die, Mama D," at 3 a.m. while charging my crystals. Love isn't blood. It's who brings you lemon jello when you're hallucinating Abraham Lincoln. I don't remember exactly when I started doing my mojitos and makeovers gatherings, but they've become something of a legend in my corner of Palm Springs. The ladies love them, or pretend to, and I love having my coral pink Spanish Revival home filled with the chatter of women my age who still care about looking fabulous. That particular Tuesday, I'd gone all out. Hired a sushi chef to prepare rolls in my kitchen, brought in my favorite esthetician for mini facials, and splurged on those Japanese orchids that cost more than most people's car payments. "Dolars, you've outdone yourself again," cooed Margaret Hollingsworth, sipping her third mojito and admiring her freshly buffed nails. "How do you do it?" I winked. "Clean living and dirty martinis, darling." That always got a laugh. At 72, I'd earned the right to my little jokes. I'd also earned my reputation as Palm Springs' most put-together widow. My silver hair was cut in the same elegant bob I'd worn since the 90s. My turquoise jewelry gleamed against my sun-kissed skin, and my closet full of white linen and bold prints made me look like I belonged in a Nancy Meyers film. I'd worked hard for this life, this home, this image. I glanced at my phone, no messages from Candace about Sunday brunch. My daughter was always forgetting to confirm unless it involved her asking for something. Roger had already texted twice that day, just checking in like he always did. My son, the reliable one, though marrying that motorcycle mechanic 5 years ago had been quite the shock to my system. "You need help with anything, Dolars?" asked Meredith, my closest friend since the divorce. She knew about the constant Candace drama. "No, I'm fine," I said, adjusting my statement necklace. Though between us, I'm still waiting for Candace to RSVP for Sunday. She's probably busy with another one of her house listings. What I didn't say, or too busy spending the money I gave her to bail out that ridiculous skincare pyramid scheme she got sucked into last year. $15,000 down the drain, and not so much as a proper thank you note. The first wave of nausea hit me between the spicy tuna rolls and the mango mojito refills. I ignored it. Women my age were always expected to disappear at the first sign of discomfort, and I refused to be that predictable. But by the time Cynthia was deep into her story about catching her husband with the Pilates instructor, I felt actual sweat beading along my hairline. Dolores Sinclair does not sweat in public. "Excuse me, ladies," I said, rising carefully. "Just need to freshen up." I made it to my bathroom, the one with the marble tiles I'd imported from Italy after George died, before doubling over. The pain was unlike anything I'd felt before, sharp and twisting like something alive inside me. I reached for my phone on the counter, but my vision blurred and the room tilted sideways. My last coherent thought before everything went dark: Candace will know what to do. Candace always comes when it matters. I was wrong. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and worried faces. The paramedic, a young man with kind eyes and a wedding ring, helped me send a group text to both my children. "Hospital, bad, please come." Roger responded immediately. "In Seattle for conference, sending Trisha, love you mom." Candace's message showed as read, but no reply came. My daughter must be in a meeting, I told the paramedic, who nodded politely. Even then I was making excuses for her. Even then I was choosing to believe the best. After all, hadn't I always been there for Candace? When she needed $40,000 for her dream wedding, to that financial advisor who later left her for his secretary. When she needed me to watch her Pomeranian for a weekend that turned into 3 months. When she begged me to fake an injury so she wouldn't get eliminated from that ridiculous dance competition, my Candace would come. She had to. The hospital room was too bright and smelled of industrial cleaner. A nurse kept asking about family while inserting an IV into my arm. My daughter is on her way, I said with as much dignity as one can muster in a paper gown. She's very busy, very important in real estate. That's nice, the nurse said, clearly not believing me. And your son, conference in Seattle, his wife might. I trailed off, unsure if Trisha would actually show up. Why would she? I'd hardly been welcoming to the tattooed woman who rode motorcycles and worked with her hands for a living. Not exactly the daughter-in-law I'd envisioned for my architect's son. The doctor came in, young enough to make me feel ancient, with a tablet and concerned expression. Mrs. Sinclair, your preliminary tests are showing signs of a severe bacterial infection. We're starting you on broad-spectrum antibiotics, but we need to keep you for observation. Your symptoms are quite serious. I nodded, suddenly afraid. My daughter will be here soon, I said, more to myself than to him. Hours passed. My phone remained silent except for Roger's texts checking in. The fever rose, and with it came a strange detachment, as if I were floating slightly above my own body. I kept checking the door, expecting Candace's blonde hair and perfectionist posture to appear at any moment. Instead, at nearly 9 p.m., the door burst open and there stood Trisha. All 5'4" of her, leather jacket still on, motorcycle helmet tucked under one arm, and a plastic bag from the drugstore in her hand. Jesus, Mama D, you look awful, she said, dropping the helmet onto a chair and rushing over. No pretense, no social niceties, just honest concern. Trisha, I said, genuinely surprised. You didn't have to come. She gave me a look that suggested I was being ridiculous. Roger's freaking out in Seattle. Course I came. She pulled out a small bottle from the drugstore bag. Brought you some of that fancy rose water spray you like. Hospital air dries out your skin, something fierce. I felt something catch in my throat that wasn't just infection. I'd spent 5 years treating this woman like she wasn't good enough for my family, and here she was, remembering what kind of face spray I used. Candace isn't here yet, I said weakly. Something flashed across Trisha's heavily made-up eyes, knowledge maybe, or resignation. Want me to try calling her? No, I'm sure she's on her way, I lied. The room spun slightly as another wave of fever hit. She always comes when it matters. Trisha just nodded and pulled up a chair. I'll wait with you until she gets here then. She was still there at midnight when the nurse came to check my vitals. Still there at 2 a.m. when I woke up confused and calling for George, my dead husband. Still there at dawn when I finally accepted the truth that Candace wasn't coming at all. Trisha turned out to be surprisingly competent in a crisis. While I drifted in and out of consciousness, she negotiated with nurses, asked doctors intelligent questions about my treatment, and somehow convinced the night staff to bring her a reclining chair so she could stay in my room. You don't have to do this, I said during a moment of clarity, watching her arrange her jacket as a makeshift pillow. Roger would want me here, she replied simply, as if that explained everything. But you and I have never been close, I admitted, the fever making me more honest than usual. She smiled, the small diamond stud in her nose catching the dim light. Doesn't mean I want you to be alone when you're sick, Mama D. That nickname, I'd always pretended to hate it, but hearing it now was strangely comforting. The night stretched on, marked by nurses coming in to check my vitals and adjust my medication. During one particularly bad spell, the fever spiked and I began hallucinating. George, the pool man, is stealing your golf clubs, I apparently announced to the empty corner of the room. Who's stealing what now? Trisha asked, immediately at my side with a cool cloth for my forehead. My husband, I mumbled. He's right there. Your husband's been gone 7 years, dollars, she said gently. I know that, I snapped, then immediately felt tears forming. I'm not senile, I just saw him. Rather than argue, Trisha nodded. What did he say? This simple acceptance, allowing me my hallucination without judgment, broke something open inside me. He said I've been playing favorites too long and it's cost me more than I know. She didn't respond, just continued patting my forehead with the cool cloth. Later, I would wonder if I'd actually said those words out loud or just thought them. Around 4 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Trisha checked it for me. It's Brandon, she said. Candace's husband. I gestured weakly for the phone. Brandon's text was apologetic. So sorry to hear you're sick, Dolers. We're at the Peninsula Palm Desert Charity Golf Tournament this weekend. Candace said you're probably just being dramatic again but wanted me to check in. Need anything? The words hit harder than any physical pain. Being dramatic again, my own daughter. The woman I'd sacrificed for championed, protected, my Candace. What does it say? Trisha asked when I was quiet too long. Nothing important, I whispered, handing the phone back. Just checking in. But Trisha had already seen the message. I watched her jaw tighten, a small muscle working in her cheek. That's pretty cold, she said finally. She's busy, I replied automatically. The defense mechanism of a mother who's made excuses for too long. At a golf tournament, Trisha stated flatly. While you're in the hospital. It's for charity, I said weakly. Trisha's laugh was short and without humor. You know what, Mama D? I've never said this to you before, but Candace is a piece of work. The bluntness was shocking. No one in my social circle would ever be so direct, but also oddly refreshing. I was too tired to maintain the facade. She's always been high-strung, I offered. She's been spoiled, Trisha corrected, but without malice. Roger tells me stories sometimes about how different it was for them growing up. I closed my eyes, not wanting to have this conversation. Not now, not with her. But the fever had weakened all my usual defenses. Roger was always more independent, I said. Candace needed more help. Needed or demanded? Trisha asked quietly. Before I could answer, a new doctor came in, this one older and with a more concerned expression than the last. She introduced herself as the infectious disease specialist. Mrs. Sinclair, your blood work shows a particularly aggressive bacterial infection. If you hadn't come in when you did, this could have progressed to sepsis very quickly. I blinked, trying to understand. You mean this could have killed me? Potentially, yes, especially at your age. We're going to adjust your antibiotic regimen and keep you for at least 2 more days for observation. After she left, Trisha and I sat in silence for a long moment. Candace doesn't know how serious it is, I said finally. Do you want me to call and tell her? Trisha offered. Considered this. Did I want my daughter to come out of obligation, out of fear, out of guilt? Or did I want her to come because she wanted to be here? No, I decided. Let's see if she checks in on her own. Trisha nodded, respecting my decision without questioning it. As the night shifted into early morning, we fell into an unexpected pattern of conversation. She told me about growing up in Arizona with 5 brothers, about dropping out of college to take care of her father after a stroke, about meeting Roger at a classic car show where she was demonstrating engine restoration techniques. He said he'd never met someone who could talk about carburetor adjustments and quote Jane Austen in the same conversation. She laughed. I found myself smiling despite everything. That sounds like my son. He adores you, you know, she said. Even when you disapproved of me, he never wavered in how much he respects you. This brought a fresh wave of emotion. I never disapproved of you, I lied. Trisha's smile was knowing. Mama D, the first time we met, you asked if I was the catering staff. I winced at the memory. That was unforgivably rude of me. Nah, she shrugged. I've been underestimated my whole life, I'm used to it. As dawn broke, casting a pale golden light through the hospital blinds, Trisha helped me to the bathroom. It was a humbling experience, needing assistance for such a basic function. But she handled it with surprising grace, averting her eyes when needed, supporting without commentary. Back in bed, exhausted from even that small exertion, I found myself saying something I never thought I'd admit. I've always favored Candace, I confessed. Given her more money, more time, more grace, even when she didn't deserve it. Trisha adjusted my pillows with careful hands. I know, she said simply. Roger told me everything. The fact that she knew, had always known, and had still come to sit with me through the night hit me with unexpected force. "Then why are you here?" I asked. Her answer was simple and devastating in its sincerity. "Because family shows up, not when it's convenient or when there's something to gain. You show up because that's what you do for people you care about." Later that morning, when the nurse came in to check on me, she spoke directly to Trisha. "Your mother's fever is finally breaking. We'll need to run more tests, but this is a good sign." Neither of us corrected her assumption that Trisha was my daughter. And in that moment of shared conspiracy, something shifted between us, a small bridge forming over a gap I'd always insisted on maintaining. "Thank you for being here," I said after the nurse left. "Roger is lucky to have you." Trisha smirked, her exhaustion evident but her spirit undiminished. "I know," I remind him every day. And for the first time since I'd met her, I saw not the rough edges and lack of pedigree that had so concerned me before, but the solid, unshakable loyalty that my son had recognized instantly. While my own daughter was at a golf tournament, dismissing my illness as being dramatic again. By the second day in the hospital, my fever had subsided enough that the fog in my brain began to clear. The doctors seemed cautiously optimistic about my progress, though they insisted I remain under observation for at least another 48 hours. Physical recovery brought with it an unwelcome clarity of thought, and memories began flooding back with painful precision. I remembered Candace's 16th birthday, how she'd thrown a tantrum because the car I'd bought her was silver instead of red. "You never listen to what I actually want," she'd screamed, while Roger quietly helped the party caterers clean up, embarrassed by his sister's behavior. I remembered the time Candace had called me from college, hysterical because she'd failed an economics exam. I'd flown across 3 states to comfort her, hired a tutor, and spoken to her professor about extra credit options. When Roger failed the same class 2 years later, I'd simply told him to work harder next time. I remembered paying for Candace's wedding to Brandon, a lavish affair with 6 bridesmaids and imported roses that cost more than my first house. Roger and Trisha had eloped to a courthouse and asked only for my blessing, which I'd given reluctantly, still believing my son was making a mistake. The pattern was so clear now, illuminated by the sterile hospital lighting and the steady beeping of monitors. All these years, I'd been making excuses for one child while expecting perfection from the other. My phone chimed with a text. Roger, checking in for the 3rd time that day. "How are you feeling, Mom? Trisha says you're doing better. Love you lots." I smiled, typing back with still shaky fingers. "Much better, your wife is a saint." Almost immediately after, my phone chimed again. I felt a surge of hope, thinking perhaps Candace had finally reached out. Instead, it was a generic animated e-card. "Get well soon," with Candace's name automatically generated at the bottom. No personal message. No acknowledgement of the severity of my condition. Not even a real signature. "Your daughter finally checking in?" Trisha asked, returning from the cafeteria with a cup of badly needed coffee. I wordlessly showed her the e-card. "Wow," she said, handing me the coffee. "That's something." "It's nothing," I corrected, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. "It's the bare minimum to avoid looking like a complete monster to her friends." I guarantee she posted something syrupy about her poor sick mom on social media. Trisha raised an eyebrow but didn't disagree. "Roger's been calling me every few hours for updates. He's trying to get an earlier flight back." "Tell him not to change his plans," I said. "That conference is important for his career." "He says you're more important." Something caught in my throat that wasn't just medication side effects. All these years, I'd given Roger so much less, and yet here he was, ready to drop everything. Meanwhile, Candace couldn't even be bothered to send a real text message. Later that afternoon, a social worker came to discuss discharge planning. She was young and earnest, with a clipboard and sensible shoes. "Mrs. Sinclair, you're improving nicely, but you'll need some support at home for the first few days after discharge," she explained. "Is there someone who can stay with you?" Before I could answer, Trisha spoke up from her position by the window. "I'll be there," she said simply. "I've already cleared my schedule at the shop." The social worker smiled, making notes. Your daughter will stay with you then? Again, neither of us corrected the assumption. But I saw the flicker of uncertainty in Trisha's eyes, the momentary hesitation. Of course she'd be intimidated by the prospect of taking care of me in my home. We'd never spent more than a few hours together before this, and those occasions had been tense at best. Are you sure? I asked once the social worker had left. What about your job? Trisha shrugged. I'm the boss. I gave myself time off. Your motorcycle repair shop, I said, realizing I'd never actually asked about her business before. Restoration and custom work mostly, she corrected gently. We specialize in vintage bikes. Roger handles the business side now, I do the mechanical work. Another revelation. My son was involved in her business. They were partners in more ways than I'd bothered to learn about. I've never seen your shop, I admitted. You've never asked to, she replied, not unkindly. The truth of that statement hung between us. I'd never asked because I'd never wanted to know. I'd been too busy focusing on Candace's real estate empire and her social climbing ambitions to take interest in what Roger and Trisha were building together. I'd like to see it sometime, I said suddenly. When I'm better. The smile that spread across Trisha's face was genuine, lighting up her features in a way that made me realize she was actually quite beautiful in her unconventional way. I'd like that, Mama D. I think you'd get a kick out of it. A nurse came in to administer my evening antibiotics, chatting cheerfully to Trisha about her mom being a fighter. Once again, neither of us corrected her. After she left, I found myself studying Trisha with new eyes. The tattoos that I'd once found so off-putting now seemed like interesting stories waiting to be told. The streak of purple in her hair that I'd dismissed as attention-seeking now appeared artistic and bold. Her rough-edged authenticity, which had so concerned me at their wedding, now felt refreshingly honest in a world of social pretense. Has Roger always known? I asked suddenly. Known what? That I favored Candace. Trisha considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. From what he's told me, yeah, since they were kids. And he never said anything, I said, more to myself than to her. He loves you, she said simply. He didn't want to make you feel bad or force you to choose. He just accepted it as the way things were and built his life anyway. The implication was clear. Roger had thrived despite my neglect, not because of my attention. He'd found his path, his passion, his partner, all without the constant hand-holding and financial bailouts I'd provided Candace. I've been backing the wrong horse, I said quietly. Trisha's laugh was unexpected. You make it sound like a bet, Mama D. Isn't that what parenthood is in a way? Investing time, love, resources, hoping for the best return? I wouldn't know, she said. No kids yet, though not for lack of trying. Another revelation. My son and his wife were trying to have children. Grandchildren I might never have known if things had continued as they were. You'll be wonderful parents, I said, meaning it. Roger will be, she agreed. He had a good example of what not to do. The statement wasn't meant to wound, I could tell by her tone, but it struck true regardless. The medication was making me drowsy again, and I felt myself drifting off, but not before one last thought crystallized with perfect clarity. I had been so wrong, for so long, about so many things. And it had nearly cost me everything that actually mattered. That night my fever spiked again. The antibiotics were working, but not as quickly as the doctors hoped. I drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between reality and fever dreams that seemed more vivid than my waking hours. Sometime after midnight, I woke to find my room dark except for the glow of monitors. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my stomach churned with nausea. I must have made some sound, because suddenly Trisha was there, materializing from the shadows where she'd been dozing in the recliner. What do you need, Mama D? She whispered. Water, I croaked. And I think I might be sick. She moved with surprising efficiency, helping me sit up, placing a basin in my lap and holding my hair back as I retched painfully. There was nothing dignified about vomiting in front of your daughter-in-law, but Trisha didn't flinch or show disgust. She simply waited until I was finished, wiped my mouth with a cool cloth and offered me a cup of water with a straw. Small sips, she instructed. Doctor said your electrolytes are all messed up. After I'd managed a few swallows, she disappeared briefly, returning with a small cup of lemon Jell-O. Nurse said you might be able to keep this down, she said. It's not much, but it's something. The simple kindness of this gesture, the fact that she'd thought to ask the nurses what I might tolerate, that she'd gone to find it in the middle of the night, broke something open inside me. I took the cup with trembling hands. Thank you, I said, and meant it more deeply than just for the Jell-O. As I slowly ate the wobbly dessert, Trisha busied herself adjusting my pillows and straightening my blankets. I noticed for the first time that she had set up a small collection of crystals on my windowsill. What are those for? I asked. She looked almost embarrassed. Just some healing crystals. Rose quartz for love, amethyst for peace, clear quartz for amplifying the others. It's probably silly to you, but it can't hurt, right? Instead of the dismissive response I might have given days earlier, I found myself genuinely curious. Do they need to be charged or something? I think I remember reading about that. Trisha's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. Yeah, actually. Moonlight is best, but the hospital lights mess with that. I've been using my phone flashlight to give them a little boost. I smiled weakly. Well, we need all the help we can get, right? She returned the smile, then frowned slightly as she touched my forehead. You're still really warm, let me get the nurse. While she was gone, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. In my feverish state, I could have sworn I saw Abraham Lincoln sitting in the visitor's chair, looking at me with wise, sad eyes. You need to rewrite your will, Dolores, Lincoln said solemnly. History remembers those who make the hard choices. When Trisha returned with the nurse, I was apparently mumbling about constitutional amendments. The nurse took my temperature, clucked with concern, and adjusted my IV. She's hallucinating, the nurse explained to Trisha. It happens with high fevers, especially in older patients. Just keep an eye on her. If she gets too agitated, press the call button. After the nurse left, Trisha pulled her chair closer to my bed. Who are you talking to, Mama D? Abraham Lincoln, I replied, too tired to pretend I wasn't losing my mind a little. He wants me to rewrite history. Instead of looking concerned, Trisha nodded thoughtfully. What did Honest Abe have to say about that? That I need to rewrite my will, I admitted. I think he's right. She sat back, clearly surprised by this confession. That's pretty heavy talk for 3 a.m. It's the perfect time for truth, I said, the fever making me more philosophical than usual. When everything else is stripped away. Trisha was quiet for a moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a small cloth bag. Speaking of truth, want to try something? Might help pass the time until your fever breaks. She opened the bag and removed a deck of cards with intricate designs. Tarot cards, something else I would have scoffed at just days ago. I'm not sure I believe in that sort of thing, I said hesitantly. You don't have to believe in it, just humor me. I promise not to predict your death or anything spooky. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. All right then. She shuffled the cards with practiced hands, then spread them in a simple pattern on my adjustable bed tray. The images were beautiful, I had to admit, with rich colors and intricate details. This card represents your past, she said, pointing to one that showed a queen on a throne. The Queen of Pentacles, a woman who created material success and security, but sometimes at the expense of spiritual fulfillment. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds about right. This is your present situation, she continued, indicating a card that showed a tower being struck by lightning. The tower, a sudden, shocking change that destroys old structures. It's scary but necessary for growth. Getting sick and ending up here, you mean? I said. She nodded. And this is a potential future, she said, turning over the final card, which showed a figure shedding an old skin or costume. Death, but it doesn't mean physical death, she added quickly. It means transformation, the death of old patterns making way for new growth. I stared at the card, transfixed by its imagery. The death of the old way, I murmured. Exactly, Trisha said softly. Sometimes we need to let things die so better things can grow. Morning came with a strange sense of resolution. My fever had finally broken during those quiet hours with Trisha and her tarot cards. The doctors came and went, expressing cautious optimism about my recovery. Arrangements were made for discharge the following day, pending one final round of tests. As Trisha helped me wash my face and brush my teeth, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it was the brush with mortality, or the unexpected connection with my daughter-in-law, or simply the stark reality of who had shown up for me when it mattered most. Whatever the cause, I knew with absolute certainty what I needed to do. Trisha, I said as she helped me into a robe that she'd brought from my home, I need you to do me a favor. Name it, she replied. Ask the nurse for some paper and a pen. And find 2 people who can witness a signature. She paused, understanding dawning in her eyes. Are you sure you're still recovering and big decisions should wait until you're feeling stronger? I shook my head. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I've been waiting too long already. When she returned with a hospital menu, the only paper available, and a ballpoint pen, I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly what I wanted to write. The nurses, curious but obliging, agreed to serve as witnesses. I wrote clearly despite my weakened state, using the precise legal language I'd learned during my 40 years as an executive assistant to the city's top corporate attorney. The makeshift will was simple but unmistakably valid under California law. My home in Palm Springs, my investment accounts, and my carefully curated collection of rare coins, worth nearly $2 million, all to go to Trisha, with the provision that Roger would of course benefit as her husband. To Candace, I left a small cash bequest, enough to show I hadn't forgotten her, but nothing more. As I signed my name with a flourish, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The nurses added their signatures as witnesses, then handed the menu back to me with bemused expressions. Is that really legal, writing a will on a hospital menu? One of them asked. Completely, I assured her. As long as it's in my handwriting, clearly expresses my intentions, and is properly witnessed. Ask any probate attorney. Just as I was tucking the menu into my purse, my phone chimed with a text from Candace. After 3 days of near silence, she had finally deigned to reach out properly. Mom, so glad you're feeling better. Brandon and I are planning a welcome home brunch for you tomorrow. Everyone's so excited to see you. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family. Love you tons. I stared at the screen, recognizing the performance for what it was, a public display of daughterly devotion now that the crisis had passed. Clever timing, too. She'd waited until she knew I was recovering to swoop in and play the role of devoted caretaker. What is it? Trisha asked, seeing my expression change. I handed her the phone. She read the message and looked up, her eyes questioning. Are you going to go? I thought for a moment, then smiled slowly. Absolutely, but I think I'll bring a guest. And this, I added, patting my purse where the menu will now resided. You're not planning to make a scene, are you, Mama D? Trisha asked, but I could see the gleam of approval in her eyes. Not a scene, I corrected. A reckoning. Discharge day arrived with surprising swiftness. The doctors gave me strict instructions about medications, follow-up appointments, and warning signs that would warrant an immediate return to the hospital. Trisha listened intently, taking notes on her phone while I nodded along, still feeling weaker than I cared to admit. Her recovery is going well, but she'll need monitoring for at least a week, the doctor told Trisha. Are you comfortable managing that? Absolutely, Trisha replied with confidence that I wasn't entirely sure she felt. Taking care of a recently hospitalized 72-year-old was hardly a small undertaking, especially for someone who'd been practically a stranger just days before. As we waited for the wheelchair that would take me to the entrance, hospital policy, despite my protests that I could walk perfectly well, Trisha handed me a shopping bag. I went to your house and picked up some clothes, she explained. Figured you wouldn't want to wear the same outfit you came in with. Inside was my favorite linen pantsuit in pale coral, a matching silk blouse, and even the right shoes and jewelry to complement it. I looked at her in surprise. How did you know which outfit to bring? She shrugged. I pay attention. You wore this to Roger's birthday last year, said it was your lucky color. This small act of thoughtfulness, knowing not just what I own but what I would want to wear, touched me deeply. Candace would have brought whatever was most convenient for her to grab. After changing and applying the minimal makeup Trisha had also thought to bring, I felt almost like myself again. A slightly paler, somewhat frailer version, but recognizable at least. As the attendant wheeled me through the corridors toward the exit, Trisha walked alongside, carrying my belongings. "Ready for this brunch?" she asked quietly. I patted the hospital menu in my purse. More than ready. Trisha had brought her motorcycle to the hospital, clearly not expecting to be transporting a newly discharged patient. "I'll call an Uber," she said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Should have thought this through better." "Actually," I surprised myself by saying, "I'd like to ride with you, if that's possible." Her eyebrows shot up. "On the bike? Are you sure that's a good idea right now?" She was right, of course. It wasn't a good idea. I was still weak, still recovering from a serious infection. But something in me had fundamentally shifted during those long hospital nights. "Rain check then," I said, "but I want to ride soon, once I'm stronger." The smile that spread across her face was worth the momentary disappointment. "Deal, Mama D, I'll even get you your own helmet, pink with rhinestones." "Make it turquoise," I corrected with a laugh. "To match my jewelry." The Uber dropped us at Candace's sprawling Mediterranean-style home in the most exclusive part of Palm Springs. The driveway was already lined with luxury vehicles, and I could see catering staff moving through the backyard, setting up what looked to be an elaborate spread. "So much for nothing fancy." "Game face on," Trisha murmured as she helped me from the car. Before we could reach the door, it swung open to reveal Candace, picture perfect in a cream linen dress, blonde hair arranged in casual waves that had probably taken an hour to style. Her smile was dazzling, practiced, and completely hollow. "Mom," she exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me carefully as if I might break. "You look amazing. We were all so worried about you." I allowed the hug, nodding, the cameras clicking as several guests captured the touching reunion. Of course. This was a performance, and I was a prop in Candace's show of daughterly devotion. "Thank you for coming, Trisha," Candace added with considerably less enthusiasm, her eyes flicking dismissively over my daughter-in-law's tattooed arms and casual attire. "Roger couldn't make it back yet?" "Still in Seattle," Trisha replied evenly. "Conference ends tomorrow." "Well, come in, both of you," Candace urged, ushering us through her marble foyer toward the sunlit patio where at least 20 people were mingling with mimosas. "Everyone's dying to see you, Mom." I recognized most of the faces, members of my social circle, a few of Candace's real estate colleagues, and Brandon's golf buddies. The conversations hushed slightly as I entered, and I was immediately surrounded by well-wishers expressing their relief at my recovery. "You gave us quite a scare, Dolers," Margaret Hollingsworth said, kissing my cheek. When Candace told us how serious it was, we were beside ourselves. I smiled thinly. "When exactly did Candace mention that?" Margaret looked confused. "Why, as soon as you went into the hospital, of course. She's been keeping us all updated." I caught Trisha's eye across the patio, where she was awkwardly declining a glass of champagne. Her slight eye roll told me she'd overheard. For the next hour, I played along with the charade. I accepted the solicitous inquiries, the gentle pats on my hand, the expressions of concern. I ate a small plate of the elaborate brunch offerings and sipped at a virgin mimosa. All the while, Candace circulated among her guests, the perfect hostess, the perfect daughter, occasionally stopping to check on me with theatrical concern. "Are you comfortable, Mom? Do you need another pillow? More water? The doctor said hydration is so important right now." As if she'd spoken to my doctor, as if she'd been there for even a moment during my 3-day hospitalization. It was Brandon who finally gave me the opening I needed. As the gathering reached its peak, he clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, his country club smile gleaming in the California sun. "To Dolers for giving us all a scare but coming through like the fighter we know she is. And to my amazing wife, Candace, who put everything on hold to make sure her mother received the best possible care. I've never seen such dedication." A chorus of approving murmurs rippled through the crowd. Candace beamed modestly, squeezing my shoulder with just the right amount of daughterly affection. Something inside me snapped. "That's very kind, Brandon," I said, rising slowly to my feet. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "But I think there's been some confusion about what actually happened this week." The patio fell silent. Candace's smile froze in place. I was hospitalized for 3 days with a bacterial infection that could have killed me, I continued. During that time, my daughter Candace sent one text message and an e-card. She did not visit, she did not call. She was, in fact, at a charity golf tournament while I was fighting for my life. Gasps and uncomfortable glances circulated among the guests. Candace's face had gone white, then red. "Mom," she hissed, "you're confused from the medication. Let's get you inside to rest." "I'm not confused," I said firmly. "I'm finally seeing clearly. The person who stayed with me through 3 nights in the hospital, who held my hair while I vomited, who made sure I had everything I needed, was Trisha, my daughter-in-law, whom I've never properly appreciated until now." I gestured toward Trisha, who looked equal parts proud and mortified at being the center of attention. "Mom, this isn't the time or place," Candace said through gritted teeth, her social mask slipping. "Actually, it's exactly the right time and place," I replied. I reached into my purse and pulled out the hospital menu. "Which is why I've made some changes to my will." Brandon's smile had vanished entirely. Candace's eyes widened in alarm. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I held up the makeshift will. "This is a legally binding document, properly witnessed and executed. I've left the bulk of my estate to Trisha, with the understanding that she and Roger will use it wisely. You'll receive a small cash bequest, Candace, but nothing more." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. "You can't be serious," Candace finally spluttered. "She manipulated you while you were vulnerable. This is elder abuse." I laughed, genuinely amused by her desperate reach. "Sweetheart, I was an executive assistant to Thomas Harrington for 40 years. I know more about legal documents than most attorneys. This will is ironclad and my mind is perfectly sound." I turned to address the stunned guests directly. "For years, I've enabled Candace's sense of entitlement. I've bailated her out financially, excused her selfish behavior, and convinced myself it was love. But this week taught me something important. Love isn't blood. It's who shows up when you need them most." Candace's facade had completely crumbled now, her face contorted with rage and panic. "After everything I've done for you, the times I've included you in my life, introduced you to my friends, invited you to my events. You've included me when it was convenient or advantageous," I corrected. "You've used me as a prop in an ATM, and when I truly needed you, you dismissed me as being dramatic again." Those were your exact words to Brandon, weren't they? Brandon had the decency to look ashamed. "This is ridiculous," Candace snapped, tears of fury forming in her eyes. "You're choosing that tattooed high school dropout mechanic over your own daughter?" "I'm choosing the person who demonstrated true family loyalty," I replied evenly. "And I should point out that that mechanic owns a successful business, has never asked me for money, and knows more about genuine love than you've learned in 41 years. I folded the will and returned it to my purse. "This brunch has been lovely, but I think it's time for Trisha and me to leave." I walked slowly but deliberately toward the exit, Trisha at my side. The gathered guests parted like the Red Sea, their expressions ranging from shock to oddly admiring. Candace wasn't finished, however. She followed us into the house, her composure completely abandoned. "You cannot do this to me," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "I am your daughter, your actual flesh and blood." I gently but firmly removed her hand. "And that should have meant something to you when I was lying in a hospital bed." "I had commitments," she insisted, her voice rising. "Important people were counting on me. And I wasn't important enough," I replied simply. "That's really all I needed to know." Brandon appeared in the doorway, his normally confident demeanor replaced by anxious concern. "Candace, honey, the guests are leaving. Maybe we should all take some time to cool down and discuss this later." "There's nothing to discuss," Candace snapped. "My mother has clearly lost her mind. We'll contest the will. We'll get a psychiatric evaluation. This is elder abuse, plain and simple." I smiled, feeling oddly calm despite the drama unfolding. "You're welcome to try, sweetheart, but I think you'll find I'm of perfectly sound mind, and changing one's will isn't a sign of mental incompetence. It's a sign of finally seeing things clearly." As we reached the front door, I paused, struck by a sudden impulse. "Trisha, wait here for just a moment. There's something I need to get from the garage." Before either of them could protest, I made my way through the side door that connected to Brandon's three-car garage. I knew exactly what I was looking for. George, my late husband, had been an avid collector of military memorabilia, and among the items Candace had claimed after his death was a vintage flamethrower from the Korean War era. Brandon had proudly displayed it on the garage wall, though I doubted he knew its true value or history. I carefully lifted it from its mounting brackets. It was lighter than it looked and almost certainly not functional after all these years, but it made a statement. I returned to the foyer where Trisha, Candace, and Brandon stood in tense silence. "Mom, what are you doing with that?" Candace demanded, her eyes widening at the sight of the flamethrower. "Taking back something that belongs to me," I replied. "This was your father's favorite piece. He would have wanted it to go to someone who actually appreciates its history." With Trisha's help, I made my way back outside where a few lingering guests were still watching the unfolding drama. I adjusted my grip on the flamethrower and walked purposefully toward the tall hedge that separated Candace's property from her neighbors. It had always bothered me, that hedge. So artificially perfect, so clearly designed to block out the rest of the world. "Mom, put that down right now," Candace called from the patio, panic in her voice. "You're embarrassing yourself." I turned to face the small crowd. "You know what I realized in the hospital? Life is too short for artificial barriers, too short for pretending, too short for maintaining appearances at the expense of genuine connection." I aimed the flamethrower at the hedge. Of course, nothing happened when I pulled the trigger. It hadn't been operational in decades. But the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. "I'm done with barriers," I announced. "Done with facades, done with relationships based on obligation rather than love." I handed the flamethrower to Trisha, who took it with amused bewilderment. "Ready to go home, Mama D?" "Absolutely," I replied, then addressed the remaining guests. "Those of you who want to join me for an actual honesty hour are welcome to come to my house next week. Bring tequila, not pretense." As we walked to the waiting Uber, I heard Candace's voice behind us. "This isn't over, Mother. I'll be calling my lawyer tomorrow." I didn't bother turning around. "I'm sure you will, darling. I expect nothing less." The next month passed in a blur of recovery, revelation, and reinvention. True to her word, Trisha stayed with me until I was back on my feet, eventually moving into my guest room when Roger returned from Seattle. Having both of them in my home brought a warmth and energy I hadn't realized was missing. Candace, predictably, filed a legal challenge to the will, claiming I had been unduly influenced while in a vulnerable state. Her attorney sent formal letters, made threatening phone calls, and promised a lengthy court battle. I remained unmoved. "Let her try," I told my own attorney, the daughter of my former boss. "I have 2 nurse witnesses, full medical clearance, and 40 years of legal secretary experience on my side." Meanwhile, I began the process of truly getting to know my son and daughter-in-law. I visited their motorcycle shop, a surprisingly elegant establishment specializing in vintage restorations. Roger showed me the books, proudly pointing out their growth over the past 3 years. Trisha demonstrated her craft, her hands sure and skilled as she rebuilt an engine from the 1940s. "This is impressive," I admitted, taking in the clean workspace and wall of awards. "You've built something special here. We wanted to invite you to the grand opening," Roger said, "but Trisha thought you wouldn't be interested." The comment stung, but I couldn't deny its truth. She was right, I wouldn't have been, but I am now. At home, I began making other changes. I donated half my designer wardrobe to a women's shelter. I kept my signature style but mixed in more comfortable pieces. I added splashes of turquoise to every room, replaced formal dining chairs with cozier options, and installed a small crystal garden in my sunniest window, with Trisha's guidance. Most significantly, Roger and I began discussing plans to convert part of my sprawling property into a community center focused on teaching mechanical skills to young people who needed direction and mentorship. "It was Trisha's idea," he explained. "A place for people who need a chosen family." "I love it," I said, meaning it completely. "Your father would have loved it too." One warm evening, about 6 weeks after my hospitalization, Trisha and I were sharing tequila sunrises by the pool. Roger was inside, finalizing plans with an architect for the community center conversion. I got my motorcycle license today, I announced, showing her the temporary paper version. Tricia raised her eyebrows, impressed. Damn, Mama D, you work fast. At my age, there's no time to waste, I replied, taking a satisfied sip of my drink. I'm thinking of getting a smaller bike to start, something manageable but still stylish. I know just the one, Tricia said excitedly. A restored Triumph from the 60s. Low seat height, gorgeous lines, turquoise paint job. It just came into the shop last week. Sounds perfect, I agreed. Now I just need the right outfit to go with it. We clinked glasses, laughing together with an ease that still sometimes surprised me. After a comfortable silence, Tricia spoke again, her tone more serious. Any word from Candace? I sighed. Her lawyer sent another letter yesterday, standard stuff threatening jury trials and public exposure of family drama. Does it worry you? I considered this. Not really. Some fights are worth having. Tricia nodded, understanding perfectly. Roger wants to reach out to her. He thinks siblings shouldn't be estranged, even with all this going on. That's because he has a good heart, I said. Better than mine, certainly. I wouldn't say that, Tricia objected. Just different, you're learning. The sun was beginning to set, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Roger came outside, paperwork in hand, looking pleased with himself. The architect says we can break ground next month, he announced. Just in time for the community college summer break. Can offer the first workshop in July. Perfect, I said, feeling a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. Though I'll need to be back from our road trip by then. Roger looked confused. What road trip? Tricia grinned. Your mom wants to ride to the Grand Canyon. I said I'd go with her. On motorcycles? Roger asked, clearly torn between amusement and concern. Of course on motorcycles, I replied. What else? He shook his head, laughing. You two are going to be the death of me. Probably, Tricia agreed cheerfully. But what a way to go. As we sat together planning adventures and new beginnings, my phone buzzed with a text. Candace, with another thinly veiled threat about the ongoing legal battle. I silenced the phone without responding and slipped it back into my pocket. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and paperwork and the messy business of standing my ground. But tonight there was family. Real family. The kind that shows up, stays through the hard parts, and brings you lemon Jell-O at 3 a.m. We should get going if we're going to make our dinner reservation, Roger reminded us, glancing at his watch. I stood up, smoothing my linen pants. Let me just change quickly. 10 minutes later, I emerged wearing one of my signature flowy dresses, but with an addition, the leather jacket Tricia had given me as a welcome to the biker gang gift. Combination shouldn't have worked, but somehow it felt exactly right. Like me, a work in progress, blending the woman I had been with the woman I was becoming. What do you think? I asked, giving a small twirl. Badass, Mama D, Tricia approved. Absolutely badass. As we drove off to meet friends for dinner, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in decades. Candace's legal challenge loomed, but I wasn't concerned. Some bridges needed to be burned to make way for new ones. Some lessons came late in life. And sometimes, the family you choose turns out to be more precious than the family you're born into, especially when they bring you lemon Jell-O and teach you to ride motorcycles.